When I was very first starting, it seemed like it would just take me forever to even write a 1,000-word article. And now that's something, if I know the topic, I can just, put that out very quickly. And then of course, I give it a good edit before I share it with anybody. But it's more practice.
Experiences, practice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome to Now Boarding, a new travel podcast by me, Payal Nayar. This show aims at creating awareness about ecotourism, sustainable tourism, responsible travel, and a lot more. We will cover stories and journeys of people who are ecotourism specialists and those who are leaders in their field. We will also be talking to people who have had unique travel experiences, remarkable conceptual places to stay, unexplored cultures, and ancient histories of various towns and cities around the world. Join me in this journey of knowing more about travel. Get inspired to see the world and discover your inner self.
Hi everyone. Today I am in conversation with Julia Goldstein. Julia founded JLFG Communications in 2011. It was meant to be a content writing business, which then progressed into her writing 4 books and 4 amazing books, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Her background as a semiconductor packaging engineer and a decade of experience writing for trade journals, I think is what sort of graduated her into making long form content and, of course, writing books. And she focuses now on the environment. So thank you so much for joining me this morning for me and the evening for you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Okay. So let's start the conversation by asking you a little bit about your background and how did you get into becoming an engineer?
Yeah, it to some degree sort of seemed like the natural thing to do because I was always interested in science and math. I actually entered college as a physics major, and that's a story I have told, which I maybe don't need to go into in incredible detail. But I switched over to engineering. I attended Harvey Mudd College, small science and technology college. There were only 4 majors at the time. Chemistry, physics, math, and engineering. And it was general engineering. And it just seemed like a much better fit than physics. And then my junior year, I discovered materials science. And because we needed to take courses in all sorts of different types of engineering, which I think is actually a great idea because I think a lot of 18-year-olds don't necessarily know exactly what they want to study. I mean, some of them do, but I think it's good to really have a broader education. In any case, I became really fascinated with material science, which is the idea that engineers can tailor materials to have very specific properties. And it's just amazing just adding a little bit of this or a little bit of that, or how you can do a different heat treatment and everything changes.
So for people who do not have a background to this or any knowledge of it, how would you define sustainability communication?
It is about how companies and brands talk about sustainability. And there's just general corporate communications where, talking about your products, talking about things that you need to communicate to employees, to customers, to investors. And when it intersects with what kind of story are we telling about the environmental impact, and that also often includes social impact, right? Public health and effect on communities and all that. And how are the company's products helping with some of those problems in some cases? Or how are they dealing with some of the environmental and social problems that might be associated with their products and how they're making things? And what are they doing to improve it? And it's a really tricky thing to tell the right story because companies don't want to just divulge everything. But then then it's like, what are they hiding? And if they can just honestly talk about the journey and really say, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, and do it in a way that makes sense for their brand. That's really what it's all about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even for me and for my understanding, absolutely. Okay, so how do you actually tailor sustainability messages for different audiences? Considering there are multiple factors like the demographics, the values. So, how do you actually create these messaging? You mentioned there's storytelling behind it, right? But if
Yes.
you could elaborate a little on that.
It definitely does matter who the audience is. And it also depends. So it depends on what industry company is in. And are you selling products to individual people who are buying them and may have really no knowledge or interest in how they're all made? Or do some of those customers really care about that? Right? What is differentiating your brand from another one? And what do the customers really care about? And sometimes it's a matter of, if you overwhelm people with just too much information and detail, then they don't know what to make of it. And it's just like, or you put too many warning labels, and then you start feeling, oh, well, shoot, everything causes cancer. So no matter what I do, I'm going to be exposed to all kinds of dangerous things. So how can I even know? Where if you can make the message simple, and it doesn't mean simple in the way that you have to treat people like they're not intelligent,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a message that they don't have to go and do a whole bunch of research to figure out. And so some of it is like, what is going to resonate? And if you're making, say, components or materials or something that are going into another product, then your customers are other businesses. And then they're going to have very different interests, and they're going to want all those specifications. Now, they still can benefit from a story about it. If, they're going to go to your website and look up what's going on. And if you can have some of those stories, but you have to back it up with the data. And that's some of that is the thing, is like, what is going to be just out there, out in front of the world, or the part of the world that needs to listen. Right, not the whole world.
Yeah.
Anyway, your customers, your suppliers, your investors, the people that need to listen to your message. What is going to be out there front and center, and then what's behind it for the people who have more questions, or who are suspicious of a just glossy story that makes everything sound all good and eco-friendly, and they say, yeah, tell us really what's happening.
Sustainability has all kinds of conversations around it now, especially now. So,
Yes.
how do you approach situations where it's controversial or polarizing sustainability? So how do you kind of navigate through that to still ensure that there is clear messaging in the kind of communications that your clients, and the kind of advice that you give them?
Yeah, I think the important thing is really to keep the company's purpose first and foremost. Because, right, why is the company in business? What is it that they are producing that has some value to society? Right? There has to be the purpose, not just to make money. And if that's the only purpose, then that's a problem. And if that's the mindset, those aren't the people I'm working with. But whatever it is that they are producing is having some positive value. Now, the environmental piece may or may not be a natural fit for that, and the customers may or may not care as much about that. And so in some places, it can be more difficult if using the word sustainability in some contexts is going to make people suspicious. Then you need to find different ways. Maybe the message is about saving energy. Right? In some cases, that's going to be a message that's going to resonate better. Or are we addressing water consumption? Can we allow, is there a way that we are, maybe if you're providing clean water to people, or you're doing things in a way that consumes less water? So that is a sustainability message, but you don't have to necessarily lead with the word sustainability. So it needs to just be relevant for the situation.
How do you see the future of sustainability communication evolving? Is it something which is very recent, or has it been around for a while? And if it has been around for a while, how has it evolved? And from present times, how do you think it's going to evolve even more?
There has definitely been a lot more attention on this kind of thing in the last few years. And I think that there are just a number of reasons for that, where we're just reaching certain tipping points that are just absolutely hard to ignore. And then just things like supply chain issues that happened because of the pandemic and things being shut down. And then you say, wait a minute, or industries realizing, wait, they can pivot and make a lot of changes. And then say, industries can change, because I think there's sometimes a lot of reluctance. It's easier to just kind of keep doing things the same way you've always done them. But there's definitely, there's sometimes when I think, wait, am I just in this bubble where everybody's talking about these issues and the concerns about climate change and the environment and public health? And it's not that it's everywhere. There's certainly pockets where people aren't wanting to listen to that message, but there are way more places where people are wanting to. And when I say this is what I'm doing, people say, that's fantastic. We really need that. And in circles, when you start talking about greenwashing, and especially certain industries that have come under pressure for this, and in case your listeners aren't aware, greenwashing is when companies are using environmentally friendly and all this kind of language as a cover for practices that really aren't so great. And the fashion industry has come under a lot of criticism, and they are working on this. But there's that tendency to say, oh yes, we have this new eco-friendly recycled content, etc.
Yeah.
And that's not the whole story. And if you're still trying to encourage people to buy hundreds of pieces of clothing a year, there's a problem there. And so there's a disconnect, and there's definitely pressure on a number of industries to say, wait a minute, we're hearing these pressures from the public, from customers, etc. What are we going to do about it? And they're starting to bring people in. They're starting to say, we need to work on both our practices and our messaging. And again, and it really it definitely depends on the industry, but there's just so much more awareness that this is an issue. And it's also extremely complicated to really figure out the whole way forward.
Yeah.
So, I do see it continuing to grow. I see that some of these movements toward let's make marketing a force for good and not only a way to sell millions and millions of more products, that some of that kind of idea is becoming more common. And so I do see a real opportunity for that. And I've interviewed some people who are in that field and working on that for my upcoming book. And I think it definitely, there is an opportunity for marketing to look different. And then, but I also see a lot of people who want to keep kind of doing things the same way they've been doing them.
Yeah. So it's the mindset and how you change it over time. I think that's really what comes into play then. Let's talk about your books, because I can't leave you without without a little bit of a background, because it's 4 books that you have authored.
Well, actually, 3 of them are out. The 4th one is I'm actually working on I was working on some editing on that today. So the 4th one doesn't come out till 2024. So, but 3 of them are out and have been published.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So could you very briefly take us through your books and what actually kind of encouraged you to write these books, and what is it that you are looking at doing as a way forward when it comes to, for example, you mentioned your 4th book. So is it aligned with the other 3 books that you've written, or is it different, or, just talk about it a little bit.
Certainly. My first book is Material Value, and the subtitle is More Sustainable, Less Wasteful Manufacturing of Everything from Cell Phones to Cleaning Products.
So
there's been a lot more.
That's very specific, right?
That is, yes. It's really interesting. I was wondering if was that did that subtitle track this one client who is in an industry where one of the things they make are cleaning products. Maybe they looked at that and said, "Oh, wait a minute, I need to get this book." And then I worked with them on some things. But in any case, well, coming from the electronics world, which is where I started my career, looking at cell phones and electronics made sense. In any case, I started that book with the idea that I wanted to really explore more about, as I said, the impact of these human-made materials on people and the planet, looking at all that, looking at, well, how are things made? And that one mainly focuses on plastics and metals, because those are, a lot of stuff is made from those, and there are certainly very, other classes of materials, which I'll get to in a moment, but a lot of it just like how things are made and how they can be made better. And, that book has attracted more sales each year, so, which is kind of an interesting thing, because it's like more people are looking for things about sustainable manufacturing than they were. It came out in 2019. And then one of the chapters talks about recycling. And so when I would give talks, to community groups, that was often what I would bring up. And so there's a segment of my audience that was really interested in learning more about that. And I had done a project for a client where I learned more than most people do about the situation about landfills in the United States. And so putting all that together, I said, okay, I'm going to make a practical guide for more, not for as much of a business or academic audience, for more of a general consumer, individual citizen audience. And so that's a short guide that just kind of says it. So that's called Rethink the Bins. And it's really about recycling and composting and, what happens to your stuff when it gets collected, and why are there all these different rules, and what can you do about it? And so, try to reduce household waste and be smarter about recycling, because the rules have changed and they will continue to change. So that's the second book, Rethink the Bins. And then my 3rd book shifted gears a bit more towards a business audience, and came out of some research I did just talking with people working in sustainability and marketing to understand some of their challenges. And it was originally going to be a report. And then I said, I can make this all into a book. And that one's called Beyond the Green Team. And that's about aligning internal and external communication for better sustainability. And that's the one that's really about sustainability communications inside businesses. So that's more of like that green business genre. And then the upcoming book is based on my first book, Material Value. And I've teamed up with a co-author, Paul Ariano, and he he and I met when he bought Material Value in spring of 2020 and reached out to me. We started this conversation that happened over the next couple of years here and there. And he at one point said, yeah, we should have a second edition because so much has changed and there's so much more to say. And at that point, I was working on Beyond the Green Team. And I thought, well, I don't have time to write another whole book. But then I thought, hey, Paul, do you want to be my co-author? And I had written the whole first book. So I realized, okay, so to earn his co-author stripes, he did the initial drafts of 2 new chapters, one on glass and one on pulp and paper products. And then we did all new interviews. And the book, it's going to end up being, it has a lot of content that does also come from the book Material Value, but it is very much different. And we keep editing it and changing it. And there's whole sections that went away. And all new, brand new interviews with people around the world. So yeah, I don't have a publication date yet for that. We need to get it. But once we get it over to the publisher and ready for copy editing, then I'll have a better idea of when that one is coming out.
My question to you was going to be, how do you have the time?
Well, one way, it's actually, I really like collaborating with other people. And that's actually something that I want to do more of, because it splits up the workload and you've got somebody to bounce ideas off of. And to me, it's just really energizing because writing can be a very solo kind of occupation, whether I'm working on, writing up a presentation that I'm going to give, or writing books, or writing other types of content for company blogs and such. It can still be a very solo sort of thing to do. I enjoy writing, and I also really enjoy teaching about what I'm doing and interacting with other people. So that's, so it takes time, but also I've been writing professionally for over 20 years. It's not like all of a sudden it's just easy, like I can just whip off something. Sometimes I can, but there's also, it's some of learning by doing.
Thank you so much, Julia. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. And
you're welcome.
And I think you're doing some amazing work. So thank you for reaching out to me, because I think it will, your conversation, I know you talk to a lot of people, but my audience will also be able to learn from what you've shared today, your journey, and the kind of responsibility that you have. So thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Now Boarding, a travel podcast. Check out other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. And of course, don't forget to share your thoughts with us. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes only on Now Boarding, a travel podcast.